This tree has become one of the most famous trees in the world. What is it?
Pigeon pea.
Pigeon pea they call it, or Cajanus cajan. And that was what the slaves that were taken to South America, the Caribbean and North America, they've had a feeling that they would have had to look after themselves in the new country. So they put seeds in their hair. And some of the seeds, pigeon pea, they took pigeon pea to the Caribbean and to South America and to North America, and now it's become a very highly regarded leguminous plant around the world. So those slaves have introduced extraordinary cuisines to the world, even though it was pretty tough conditions. But there's been a book written about it, In the Shadow of Slavery. It's quite a good book. It's one of the trendy books of the times. And it just tells the story of how they were allowed for half a day a week to tend their own plots in the plantations of North America. And they grew pigeon pea and a whole lot of other plants, and that supplemented the pretty shocking food they were getting from the slave owners, you know, the plantation people. You've got the rosemary. So the Romans went off to England in 50 AD, wasn't it? Or something like that. They went off and they brought their Mediterranean herbs to England. And then British people came out to Australia and they brought their herbs with them. Rosemary, thyme, sage, and parsley and others, and they come from the hills of the Mediterranean. The Roman herbs went to England and then British people brought them out here. So they stayed until the 1950s, and then the migrants from around the world came to this country and brought all the other cuisines, you know, the Mexican, the South American, and this beautiful blend that is in this country now. And places like this, it's great to see the blend of edible and medicinal plants from around the world. This one here is Brazilian cherry. A lot of people don't like it because it grows wild in the bushland, but it's very tasty fruit at certain times of the year. That one there, avocado. That one there, cassava, the famine food of the world. It has those underground tubers. You all had cassava? Yeah, pretty tasty, but you've got to be careful of cassava because too much of it has got cyanide in it. So people who eat it continually, they don't do that well on it, apparently. So it's good to mix cassava with other foods. Olivia. Over here, we've got the fabulous passion fruit from South America. Passiflora edulis. Galangal from Asia. And Asian greens. It's good to have the mix. And our old friend that we saw when we walked around before lunch, Okinawa spinach. Comes out of the islands of Okinawa. The oldest people in the world live in Okinawa, apparently. You've seen the DVDs of the old women in their 90s and over 100. And they eat 5 leaves of that every day, apparently. Along with the other one from Asia. A lot of good Asian herbs are gaining favour in the cuisine in this country. That's another Asian herb there, isn't it? Or Asian green. This was the one we mentioned at lunchtime. Chinese artemisia, otherwise known as mugwort. And it's very pungent. But a little leaf, when you get the urge, when you feel like you've got a few parasites in you, you chew up a leaf and swallow it down. And that'll kill the parasites in your intestines. And then you somehow feel a bit better after doing that. But if you continually eat it, it doesn't do so well because it's quite a toxic plant. So just when you feel, you know how that, you think, oh yeah, a little bit of artemisia. And there it is, you know, half a leaf they reckon. This one here, they call it Bali Gum. And it's used in boat building. When the first settlers came around here, they had to have boats because they didn't have any way of getting up the rivers. So this was one of the boat building timbers. And it's still a very common plant on the edge of the rainforest. So it grows up, it's a close relative to camphor. You see how it almost looks like camphor, but it's a bit different. So it's got the silver on the backs of the leaves. When the wind blows, it reflects sunlight, so it doesn't die off of desiccation. It doesn't transpire so much that it dies. So these plants that are pioneers on the edge of the rainforest, they often have silvery leaves like that reflect sunlight. If it reflects sunlight, it doesn't pump out as much water, so it can survive in dry times or windy times. So all these amazing strategies, you know, they've written books about it now. The secret life of plants, the emotional life of plants, the networking of plants, you know, all these concepts that are really gaining favour in our culture, where plants actually cooperate and network and look after each other and all that. They're finding it, we animals think we got it all over plants, but actually they say it might be the other way around. But anyway. So as summer deepens, the beautiful winter herbs from Europe die out. That's chickweed. See how chickweed's gone to flower? Chickweed's a very famous edible plant from around the world. That little tiny thing there, see that? So in summer it just disappears. But then when it gets cooler again, chickweed just invades everybody's gardens. You know chickweed? Celery media they call it. It's one of the famous herbs. So you can gorge chickweed. You pick it up, great amounts of it. This one over here is slender celery from South America. And it's a very common plant, but sadly, you know, you go around to people's places, they get out the whippersnippers. Look at that, it's a little celery, I just pulled it out, I didn't mean to. But it's just like a little miniature dill, see that? It's got that celery taste. And the celery taste is supposed to be salty. So parsley, celery and seaweed, they're the salty herbs. And what's the salty taste good for? The heart, what? The heart and circulation of blood, they reckon. A little bit of salt. They recommend the equivalent, if you eat whatever it is, seaweed, celery or parsley, the equivalent salt, about a flat teaspoon of high quality salt per day these days. You heard that one? Used to be no salt, but now they reckon a little bit of salt every day is good for the circulation of blood, you know. Otherwise, I find personally, if I don't have my salt each day, I wake up in the night with these cramps, you know, cramps in my legs where not much circulation happening. So it just maintains that circulation. And why not? So it's pretty common, that one. Along with, you know, if you haven't got any parsley in the garden, you can always maybe find that. So this one here is a very famous plant. They call that one native guava, Artemisia lorina. And it grows commonly in North Queensland, but it also grows around here. And that's a very beautiful specimen. I don't know whether you planted that one, but it's looking good. And it's got edible fruit. So you go through the bushland around here and you find these little guavas, these native guavas. They taste a bit like detergent, but they're supposed to be edible. And there they are. And it's supposed to be a primitive plant, and it only survives in the... They reproduce by beetles eating the male parts of the flowers, and then they somehow go and eat the female parts, and the little tiny gametes have to swim in the saliva of the beetle to survive. And they reckon that's a primitive feature, and there's lots of these primitive plants in North Queensland, and now the scientists reckon that the rainforests of the world radiated from the wet tropics of North Queensland. The little old Australia, now they say it's the tectonic focal point of the world. And there's zones of instability around Australia which is fairly stable. There are not too much earthquakes or volcanoes in this country, but around the Pacific and around, you know, America and around Indonesia, there's these earth disturbances in concentric rings around this stable focal point of the world, which is this country. So why not? And that's just one of the primitive plants that indicate the ancient origins of the Australian flora. Hear that little frog calling? What is it? That one? They call it Latoria phallax, and that's the little dwarf sedge frog. And it's the one with a big, like a balloon at the bottom of its tiny little throat, and it makes that big sound, you know, it blows itself up and then it goes like that. Pretty common. But it tells that rain's coming. When they start calling, it means it's going to rain. And that one over there is the foam bark tree. See the one that Peter just walked past? So that, with the clothesline attached to it, is the one the indigenous people ripped the bark off, mashed it up, put it in the creeks. It is somehow the chemical reaction in the creeks would take the oxygen out, and the fish in the creeks would come gasping to the surface. And the indigenous people would catch them, throw them out, and then other people would cook them up and they'd eat them. So fungus and algae get together. The fungi provide the structure, the algae provide the nutrition. They both work together, and if they've got to be together helping each other, otherwise the whole organism doesn't survive. So it's this obligatory sharing that occurs pretty commonly in nature, and now more and more in human culture. This idea that just somehow things work out better if you can share resources. So lichens grow in Antarctica. In fact, they reckon it's the oldest living organisms in the world.
Yeah, well, they can eat rocks, and they reckon that's where all the first erosion happened, was from lichens eating basalt and stuff. Yeah,
lichens in Antarctica, single specimens of lichen 10,000 years old. They've been growing there for 10,000 years in that situation. So it's good to see lichens. Not so many grow in cities. Unpolluted conditions they prefer, like places like this.
The leaves look a bit like curry leaves.
They do look a bit like curry leaves. In fact, it could be in the same family as curry leaf. Yeah, in that family, Sapindaceae. Hey look, we can't do this for too long, but it's a pretty great spot.
This video was brought to you by Live on Love Productions. If you want to help support us make more free content like this to educate through polymath education, then you can subscribe to our Patreon. And if you want to come here and learn more in person, you can check out some of our courses and also come for our grazing tour. You'll find you there in no time. Known for the dope rhyme, celestial serpent. Life is so play, it's a blessing to be working. Every day, first thing I give thanks for all that I have, all that I am. Rich man without money, but I'm rich in many other ways. Summer day, chilling out, 12-month holidays. Not afraid, not intimidated by the darkness. Live in paradise, knowing home is where the heart lives. Rise and shine.